is a special presentation from WAAY 31 Sports, your home for the SEC. Every November, time stands still for one game. The state of Alabama is split right down the middle as cries of War Eagle and Roll Tide echo from Auburn to Tuscaloosa. Records and rankings mean nothing when the Crimson and White clash with the Burnt Orange and Navy. The Tide need a win to make the playoffs, and the Tigers couldn't be happier to play spoiler. It's the 89th meeting of the Iron Bowl preview from Zaxby's. The battle for Bama starts right now.
There is nothing quite like it. It's the biggest game in the state and one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in all of college football. This Saturday, Auburn and Alabama will meet for the 89th time, and while this game may not decide who's going to Atlanta, it won't stop these teams from playing like there's no tomorrow. Welcome into the Battle for Bama Iron Bowl special alongside Trevor Denton. I'm Max Cohan, and Trevor, this is the one we've been waiting for.
Yeah, you can already tell from some of the trash talk from the players this week that this game means just as much as it always has, of course, even without those SEC title implications, Max.
Yeah, Trevor, and in the last few years, this game has followed a similar formula. Alabama needs to win to make the playoff, and Auburn couldn't be happier to play spoiler, but the Tide's plans took a turn on Saturday, and now heading into their first Iron Bowl without Nick Saban since 2006, the Tide have taken an interesting path to the final Saturday in November. The Kalen DeBoer era couldn't have started much better for Alabama. Hosting Western Kentucky in Week 1, Jalen Milroe threw for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns on just 9 attempts, sending Ryan Williams to the end zone on his first 2 collegiate receptions. Milroe would finish the game with 5 total touchdowns in the 63-0 win. Week 2 would see Bama bring it again as the Tide rolled over USF 42-16. Alabama only led by 1 point entering the fourth, then they scored 4 touchdowns in the final period, giving them the 26-point victory. The Tide hit the road in Week 3, traveling to Camp Randall Stadium for a clash against Wisconsin. But for the 3rd straight Saturday, no one could hold Bama down. Milroe had his second 5-touchdown performance as DeBoer's squad entered the bye week 3-0 with the 42-10 dub. The squad would wrap up September with a dogfight at Bryant-Denny. In this top 4 battle between Alabama and Georgia, the Tide would pull off the upset as Milroe had nearly 500 yards of total offense, including a go-ahead 75-yard touchdown to Ryan Williams with just over 2 minutes left in the game. The Tide hung on to win 41-34, taking the top spot in the AP poll. But what comes up must go down, and Alabama found that out the hard way. Playing an unranked Vanderbilt squad in Nashville, the Tide couldn't contain Diego Pavia and suffered their first loss to the Commodores since 1984, 40-35. Things didn't look right again the next week when Milroe was picked off twice against South Carolina. Still, the Tide found a way to gut that one out, 27-25. But they wouldn't be so lucky their next time out. Milroe was picked off twice again as the Tide suffered their second Tennessee travesty of the season, falling to the Volunteers 24-17. That's when people started to count the team out, but then they turned things around. Back on Saban Field, the Tide shut out a ranked Mizzou squad 34-0, but Milroe still didn't look right, held to just 1 rushing touchdown in the contest. But the next week was a different story. Playing what many believe to be an elimination game in Death Valley, the Tide rolled over LSU with a huge performance from Jalen, rushing for nearly 200 yards and 4 touchdowns in a 42-13 beatdown on the Bayou. As everyone expected, the Tide took care of business against Mercer. Milroe scored 3 touchdowns in a game that saw 4 Tide quarterbacks take snaps as Alabama won 52-7. Then their path to the SEC championship game was clear. Beat Oklahoma and Auburn, and you're heading to Atlanta. But the Sooners stunned the Tide with a nightmare in Norman. Milroe was picked off 3 times as Alabama was held without a touchdown for the first time since 2011 in the 24-3 loss. Now, as anyone who's watched any Auburn football this year can tell you, the team was a few throws away from having a decent season that would have included a few wins over ranked teams.
Yeah, turnovers, blown leads led to a very frustrating season on the Plains, but the fan base finally had reason to celebrate this past Saturday when Auburn broke through for its first win over a ranked team since 2021. Let's take a look at how they got to that point. While Auburn hung 73 points on Alabama A&M, the Tigers hit their first roadblock soon afterwards. Peyton Thorne threw 4 interceptions in a 21-14 loss to Cal. that took the air out of Jordan Hare. That led Hugh Freeze to switch over to Hank Brown at quarterback, but that move did not provide a cure for the turnover bug. Brown gave it away 3 times in a loss to Arkansas in the SEC opener. With Thorne now back as the starter, the Tigers showed fight against ranked teams in Oklahoma, Georgia, and Missouri, but they couldn't make the critical plays when it mattered most, getting outscored 42-10 across those fourth quarters. Auburn finally broke through on the final weekend of October. Jarquez Hunter ran for 278 yards in Lexington as the Tigers beat Kentucky for their first SEC win in nearly a full calendar year. The offense got humbled again quickly, though, mustering just 7 points in their first ever loss to Vanderbilt at home. Auburn entered its final bye week with a 3-6 record. But they came out of it with newfound confidence on offense. Freshman Cam Coleman scored 3 times in a win over UL Monroe. And then the team recorded its biggest win of the Hugh Freeze era. After 4 hours and 4 overtimes of football, Auburn took down number 15 Texas A&M, causing a sea of fans to descend onto Pat Dye Field.
I think our kids have started playing with more of a will to win and believing that they can. Not sure exactly what caused that. I'd love to play some of those games over. I think we could be sitting here with 1 or 2 losses and feeling quite pretty good about the season, but we didn't get it done, but we did tonight.
Now the Tigers will try to pick up their first win over Alabama since 2019.
When looking at these squads, it's clear that Alabama is the better team this year, but Auburn has some weapons that could cause major problems on Saturday. The most obvious one is running back Jarquez Hunter. The senior has put together his best season of his career, surpassing 1,100 rush yards and scoring 8 touchdowns. Hunter has gone over 100 yards in 3 of his last 4 games, highlighted by a 278-yard performance against Kentucky. In the last Iron Bowl in Tuscaloosa, he ran for 134 yards. Of course, you can't forget that the Tigers have a young stud at wide receiver as well. Freshman Cam Coleman hauled in a touchdown in his first game at Auburn, but he's really turned things on late in the season with 5 touchdowns in his last 2 games, going over 100 yards in both contests. And while Keandre Lambert-Smith has been the guy all season long, Coleman is just 1 score behind him. And on the defensive side, Keldrick Falk has been a menace, racking up sacks and TFLs to help keep the Tigers in games time and time again. The sophomore edge rusher will be looking to send Jalen Milroe to the grass multiple times on Saturday.
Some of the Tigers players may not be too impressed with Alabama's talent on offense, but there is zero doubt that the Tide do have some electric playmakers. Of course, Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe hasn't thrown it as well this season with 15 touchdown passes and 9 interceptions, but he does lead the team in rushing yards and has 17 scores on the ground. So he's a very unique threat that the Tigers will have to tailor a specific game plan for. Of course, Milroe's favorite target, the 17-year-old phenom Ryan Williams. He scored 10 touchdowns as a true freshman, and even though Auburn's DeMarcus Riddick said he was no big-time player, there is no ignoring Williams when he is on that field. And defensively, you've got to mention Jihad Campbell, the Tide's tackle monster, has 20 more than any of his teammates this season, leading the team in sacks and tackles for loss. And with Deontay Lawson out for the year, he's that much more important this week for the Iron Bowl. North Alabama will always be an important pipeline for both Alabama and Auburn, and both these teams feature a handful of players from our area.
Yeah, you can count 6 Crimson Tide players that call North Alabama home. That includes freshman defensive back Griffin Hansen from Mars Hill. Florence native Neeland Hibbett is the team's starting long snapper. Another former Falcon, Jalil Hurley, plays defensive back. He's appeared in 9 games this season. 2 offensive linemen represent our area in J.D. Martin and Billy Roby. And then you have another member of the secondary with Russellville's Connor Warhurst helping out on the scout team.
And it's been an eventful year for local players on the Tigers, especially when it comes to special teams. Alex McPherson was expected to be the starting kicker heading into this year, but he's battled an illness and has only attempted 2 field goals and 3 extra points, and that was in 1 game of action. Sardis grad Eli Morton has played in 2 games this year, while Madison Academy's Austin Chambers is a true freshman defensive lineman. Another Mustang, Ian Vachon, has stepped up in McPherson's place, making multiple clutch kicks in that win over Texas A&M.
Now, Ian Vachon's journey to the Iron Bowl is unlike all the other players. The Madison Academy alum did not sign to play out of high school. In fact, he was playing D3 football at Birmingham Southern until the school closed its doors. When he was forced to transfer, he thought his football days were done, but then Auburn called and he walked on. Vachon entered the season third on the depth chart behind preseason All-SEC kicker Alex McPherson and Towns Magoo, but he would get his shot against ULM, netting all 8 of his attempts. He was called on again last week against Texas A&M, drilling the game-tying field goal in the final seconds of the fourth in a game where Auburn would go on to upset the Aggies in quadruple overtime. Now, the lifelong Alabama fan will get to live out his dream of playing at Bryant-Denny Stadium, even though he'll be hoping for a Tiger win.
Truly, just absolutely blessed to be in this position and to get to play in the best rivalry in college football. To be honest, Saturday is going to be a big day, and we're just preparing and getting ready to go in there and try to ruin a little season.
Now, 2 of the last 3 Iron Bowls have been decided by 3 points or fewer, so Vachon has the potential to play a major role on Saturday.
Time for us to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere.
When we come back, ESPN's Roman Harper breaks down why either team could win this.
You're watching the Battle for Bama on WAAY 31.
War Eagle, roll tide from the Horn of Africa.
Well, not that anyone needs a reminder, but these are 2 teams that have both had moments where they look like they can hang with the best, and others where it looks like they're just lost.
Yeah, that's right. But we wanted to take a look past what Max and I see on the sidelines on Saturday. And for that, we caught up with Alabama alum and Super Bowl champion Roman Harper.
Played in a couple of these games. How dangerous is a team that really has nothing to lose and wants to play spoiler?
Well, that's been the scariest times when I've seen Auburn is when nobody gives them a chance, when it's not even going to be close, they're not going to be good. I actually think Alabama's in a better place because Auburn actually won a game last week. That's my opinion. But I've seen the craziest of crazy things. So I'm never, ever truly comfortable as an Alabama fan and as an Alabama grad in the Iron Bowl. You just can't be if you're Alabama.
When you look at this game and the history, how glad are you as an Alabama fan that this matchup isn't taking place in Auburn?
Oh, well, you heard Nick Saban over the weekend. That place is haunted, bro. I second that big time. Like, I've been there. I've seen the wildest of the wildest. That's what that game is there.
Looking at the season that Alabama's had, a lot of fans will be upset with a 3-loss regular season just because of how it is in Alabama. but you know how hard it is to win in college football. What would you say about what Kalen DeBoer's been able to do in his first season?
Look, it's sad to say because I want to say that it would be a successful season, but it really wouldn't be because the way they lost and who they lost to. On top of when you beat teams like Georgia, when you beat a team like LSU the way you did, and then you follow it up with these disappointing losses, like that to me is where it's just like it's just not where it could be.
When you look at the Auburn team, you take back a couple interceptions. It's a very different season on the Plains. How much do you think this team really could be dangerous, but their record and the losses that they've suffered maybe make people overlook them?
I think that's exactly why people overlook them. But they lost a lot of one-score games. They've been close in every game at some point in time. Peyton Thorne hasn't been turning the football over as much as he did earlier this season. Like, all these things kind of help you figure out who you are. They also have a really, really good running back and some really, really good wide receivers. And their defense is pretty salty. And so Auburn has a lot of the fixings of a really great meal. They just don't know how to plate it all together in the right amount of time. So that's kind of where they've been at. But they can beat anybody, like I said before, when they play the way that they are capable of playing. But we'll have to see because this is a game that both of these teams need desperately. And so the most desperate team is usually the team that wins.
Isn't that right? Watching the Iron Bowl is one thing, but playing in it, that's what dreams are made of.
Yeah, right after the break, you'll hear from two guys about just how special it is to play in the Iron Bowl in the state that you're...
ABC, Saturday at 3:30 and 7:30 p.m. Eastern.
You're watching the Battle for Bama on WAAY 31.
Trevor, you've been to a lot of Auburn games this year, and one player in particular that's really stood out to many people, I know, including you, is Keldrick Falk.
Yeah, that's right. It's really been a breakout season for the sophomore defensive lineman, and even when the team was struggling, he's been a dominant force for that defense, and he's really become the heartbeat of that unit on and off the field. I sat down with him to learn more about the state of the program in year 2 under Hugh Freeze. Fresh off a win over number 15 Texas A&M, Auburn is riding high into this year's Iron Bowl. Keldrick Falk thinks that momentum started with a win on the road at Kentucky.
How much did finally getting that first SEC win under your belt, how much did that help the mood around the locker room and around this football facility?
Man, it gave everybody confidence that we could, I mean, everybody knew we could play with anybody, but just to see that scoreboard in our favor, gave us even more confidence. And we don't need to lose that, because confidence is one of the major things that you need in this conference. You don't have confidence, you don't have a win. You don't have a chance to win.
While sitting at 5-6 isn't where the Tigers hope to be, Folk believes the program is trending in the right direction as they enter their most important game of the season.
I don't think we're too far off as far as just because we're competing with the best of the best, and you know, we're in the games with some of the best teams in the country. We just got to finish those games when we have the chance to. I want to tell all the freshmen that's coming in this coming up year just to come in and work, because when you get here, we have a standard that we're gonna practice by. We're gonna go and handle our business by.
And does it feel like you're one of those guys right now, one of those key guys that's responsible for upholding that standard at the moment?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm definitely one of the guys that feel responsible to hold up that standard. If I don't hold up the standard, then other guys feel like they don't have to. It's a good burden to have just because I want to hold that standard. That standard is how we're going to get better in the long term.
Well, I appreciate your time. It's been a lot of fun watching you this year.
Yes,
Best of luck with the rest of the
appreciate it.
season. Thank you, man.
Always jarring when you get called sir for the first time in an interview. That's how I know I'm getting old. But as he's getting older, continue to be a focal point for the team. He said they're playing with confidence right now. You could definitely see that in that win over Texas A&M, Max.
Yeah, this team is playing with confidence, and it probably makes Alabama fans feel a little bit concerned. Had they lost that game to Texas A&M, the feelings are a little bit different, especially because Alabama lost to Oklahoma.
Absolutely.
You really never know what's going to happen in the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, it felt like the Tigers needed that win over Texas A&M to prove to themselves that, hey, we can compete with the big dogs. Up until that point, they'd had many close calls, many drives with the ball there at the end, couldn't get it done. Now they've gotten it done. They have proof of concept. We'll see if it carries over.